Welcome to the Author's Den, a place where we encourage reading and writing. A place where you can meet authors and book illustrators. A place to get your questions answered about writing, publishing, and promoting your book. Hello and welcome to the Author's Den. Glad you could be with us today. My guest is Irene Miller, author of Into No Man's Land. Irene, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
You know, a fascinating book, and I know that you've been promoting it a lot.
I'm a Holocaust survivor with a uncommon survival journey. We left Poland in 1939. We, that is my family, made up of my parents and my sister, 5 years my senior. My parents had been politically very active, liberal. My father was one of the leaders in the Jewish division of the labor union, and they felt that as Jews and liberals they would be among the first one to be persecuted by the Nazis. So in the winter of 1939 and 40, we tried to escape the Soviet Union, hired a Polish guide to smuggle us across because the borders had been closed. The Soviets would not allow anyone to enter. But this guide, instead of taking us across, dumped us in the no man's land, saying that we had crossed the border. So my journey starts with the no man's land, where in the winter I spent about 6 weeks under the open sky. That was my home. From there we ended up in a small community around Bialystok.
Where is that?
That is on the Soviet side. You probably are aware of that. The Soviets came to an agreement with the Germans that they will not interfere in with the Germans occupying Poland, and in return will get some part of Poland adjacent to their borders. And Bialystok was that part that used to be Poland, and through that agreement became Soviet Union.
Who are you traveling with at this point, and how old are you?
I am about 6, traveling with my parents and my older sister, 5 years my senior.
So your father's with you at this point?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, continue, please.
And my book continues through the trials of survival, hunger, starvation, deprivations of any kind. We ended up for 6 weeks on trains, locked up in cattle cars, living on a bowl of soup a day, not knowing why and where the Soviets picked us up in the middle of the night. Or the next step was Siberian labor camps. I did not talk to my children about my Holocaust years. As a matter of fact, I didn't talk to anyone until some years, not too many years ago. But my youngest child, Naomi, kept on asking, and I must have related some vignettes to her, because I found in her high school writing a reference to 2 incidents in the Siberian. Everything was rationed, including bread. The only place you could buy anything was in the governmental store, and people didn't go to buy what they needed, but to see what happens to be available. And I found in Naomi's writing about my mother sent me to the store to buy the family's rations of bread. And bread didn't come in the elegant loaves the way we have them in the supermarket. They were big lumpy round things, and the clerk in the store would weigh what's the portion for 4 people. And I was telling Naomi that it took an enormous willpower on my part not to eat that little piece. I was giving a big piece and a very small because I was extremely hungry. So she asked, then how come you didn't eat it? I explained to her that we had to wait until my mother divides it and have it. So this is part of my Siberian experience, hunger, constant hunger. My mother was one of 12 siblings, 8 of whom with their families lived in Warsaw. She was either the youngest of the 12 or among the youngest. We had about 60, 70 members of the family, but we were the only one who tried to escape. And by the way, all others, not a single one survived, all others perished.
You know, I know that you have many stories to tell about this whole journey, and all the more reason for people to buy your book, to find out all the details. Did you write as a child?
As a child, I was writing poetry. As a young child, I never cried, I did not complain, but I was expressing my feeling in poetry. Miraculously, one notebook survived, and looking back at it, I'm amazed that it was written by a child. Nothing cute, nothing funny, kind of a heavy, serious. How did I come? I thought that someday I will write the book of my life. Someday, whenever I have nothing better to do. But I had a very, very busy professional life, and that someday somehow wasn't coming. I had difficult to talk to me about it. I had a personal experience, to me more painful than the Holocaust. My daughter Naomi was killed at the age of 28. I had an enormous passion to write, a great need to write about my life with Naomi. I wrote that book, and a professor at University of Michigan edited it. She invited me thereafter to take a course of advanced fiction writing. She said, you will not have to pay tuition. I did not need the credits. I have 3 college degrees and didn't need another few credits. I took the class. I was the only adult. All the others were younger than my kids. One of my chapters I wrote in that class as a freestanding story. We had to, the students were reading each other's work and criticizing. The reaction of my fellow students was, it is well written, but we suggest that you tame it. It isn't very believable. They were not aware that this was my true life story.
And it was the truth.
The true life story. I wrote then, when I said then, it's about 6, 7 years ago, I wrote that first draft, but didn't do anything about it.
Of the book.
But didn't do anything further about the book. Took a few years. My book was published almost a year ago in November of 2012. About a year before that, I suddenly had that enormous urge, what is the expression, fire in the belly, to write the book. And the University of Michigan was interested in me writing. The historian who was in charge of the Holocaust project, knew of my story, and he said that the university would be very glad to publish my book. And I went back, and it didn't take me probably more than 6 or 9 months, and I did that.
Talk to me a little bit about how you came out of all of this, and then what set you on your adult life. I mean, you mentioned you had 3 degrees. We have a lot to talk about.
Yes. When I wrote the book, my university contact said, people would want to know, how did the Holocaust affect your life? I have never asked myself that question. As a matter of fact, for many years I didn't even consider myself a Holocaust survivor. I didn't have any tattoos on my arms, and I thought, well, I never gave it a thought. When posing that question, I asked myself, how did it affect me? Of course, we have only one lifetime. I don't know how I would have been without the Holocaust. But The greatest loss that I experience is not having any extended family. When it comes to difficult times in life or joyous times in life, we want to be surrounded by those who were a continuity. I describe myself in the book, in the epilogue, like a house without a foundation. I don't remember much of my childhood until about age 6, yes. But somewhere from there, I had to become an adult. And that probably stays with me, a kind of a longing for continuity and validation in one way or another that I was a kid.
You had to give that up because of what you went through.
It wasn't a choice. When survival faces you, you have to act accordingly.
Can you talk about when the war ended?
The war ended in 1945, but I was in Uzbekistan, a southern part of then Soviet Union, in an orphanage. And apparently the orphanage was unable to return until 1946. I assume the Polish government needed to prepare facilities to accept. So with my orphanage, I returned to Poland, to Krakow, and spent another 4 or 5 years in orphanages. I spent in total about 8 years of my life in orphanages.
How did you end up in the States again?
When I speak to high school kids, and I do speak at the Holocaust Center about once a week, and when this question is asked, I tell them, I do something I don't recommend you do. At 18, I married a man from Detroit. I tell them I'm not against marriage, I'm against 18. So this is how I ended up in Detroit. He was a Jew working there, and I was 18, he was about 25. I married 2 men and I divorced 2 men. I sometimes say kiddingly, I was either poor at choosing or good at divorcing. But neither one or another asked much about my background, and we didn't talk. They were both Jews.
How'd you feel about that anyway?
As a rule, it did not trouble me because I myself was not thinking about it.
You mentioned that you had 3 college degrees.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
My undergraduate degree is in psychology. I have a master's in social psychology and a second master, an MBA with a major in hospital management. I had very rewarding work. Yes.
What did you do for a career when you were in the United States?
What I did, I was an executive in the healthcare field and gravitated toward the area of psychiatry and mental health. My last 7 years of gainful employment, I worked for the Detroit Medical Center, and I was the director of drug addiction and dual diagnosed, that is drug addiction mental health for women and children. I was also director of Livingston County of Mental Health, and that was a tough job. This is the time when the head of Ku Klux Klan resided in Howell, and my offices were in Howell. One of the board members who owned the only radio station in Howell interviewed me, and the next day one of the commissioner called her and said, "Ann, there's some darn thing wrong with your radio. That woman came through as if she has an accent." That was one thing. No. And I worked closely with a colleague, an African-American woman, very competent lady. And when there was an open position in the drug addiction, I asked her, "Why aren't you applying?" We were sitting having lunch together in one of the restaurants. She said, "In that place, look at that, all the eyes are on us." So I said kiddingly, "Because we are 2 good-looking women." Mm-hmm. But that was not the reason. When I left, it isn't that I wanted to retire. Oh, it's about 13 years ago. There was an awful lot of turmoil at that point. It became extremely stressful and unpleasant. And I thought that I would leave and set up a private consulting office. But the longer I procrastinated, the less I was inclined to do so. And I went instead to study art and went to the Detroit Institute of Art, studied for a year intense, became a docent. At that time, my husband was still working. He was a physician.
Let's talk more about the book. Now, you said you started it kind of as a one story and it grew from there?
When I wrote it as a freestanding story, I wrote it with the idea that this will become a chapter of my book. At that time, I knew that someday I would write a book. I just didn't know what's that someday. And in my epilogue, I explain more what made me decide to do it at this point in time. So I kept that as one chapter. And the chapter it's called No Man's Land.
Did you have any books or authors that inspired you as a kid?
As a kid, I was very fascinated by all those bold, brave women who did unusual things. And I dreamed that I will marry a very poor man and that we will work together on science, and that we will save humanity, though we will live in a poor barn or other such things.
Do you remember any other books that in particular that you might have read? Or?
No. First of all, before the war, I was too young to read books. But when I came back, I read a lot of the classics. Very much moved by the classics, by some of the great Russian authors, because I heard about them when I was in the Soviet Union, Dostoevsky and others. So I read a lot of those, and a lot of those French authors too.
So at what point did you actually decide, I'm going to write a book and start writing it?
The first book, my memoir about my life with Naomi, I immediately after her death, I had a great need to write. I looked at the letters that we had, and she and I had a very close relationship, and she was a gifted writer and a creative, beautiful young woman. And looking at those letters, I thought some mothers and some daughters might gain from understanding that. So that was no question.
You've written more than one book.
I have written a book, but it was not published.
Okay, that's what
My
you're
Life
referring
is
to.
Naomi, what I am talking. I tried to publish it commercially and was told it is very well written, moving, but memoirs sell only of famous or infamous people. And I didn't meet either one category. Immediately after that, this professor said, she invited me to take her class of advanced fiction writing. At that time, I knew before then that someday I'll write my memoir about my life.
Did you have a routine, a regimen, anything? How did you write?
When I wrote my first book, I didn't know how to use a computer. So my secretary showed me where you put your fingers on the keyboard. So I bought a computer and was packing it out. And there, the first book, it was such intense that every free moment I was at the computer when I came home after work. This book that we are talking about now, no, I didn't have any routine. But once I start a project, I don't procrastinate. I'm a doer. I want to see it done. So I had that great desire to see it done. I did not have any other intentions but to tell the story, because I felt the story should be known. But it became for me an additional means of promoting or tolerance, of acceptance of tolerance. Acceptance of tolerance of diversity has been a passion for me all my life, my adult life. I have served on the board of directors of the American Jewish Committee for more years than I can remember. And the American Jewish Committee is the oldest civil rights organization in the nation. Through them, I was able to promote acceptance of diversity. But this book became to me another platform to show what happens if we live in a world that we do not accept people who look differently than we, people who pray differently or eat differently. So for me, this book became a mission.
Was there a person or people who encouraged you to write, other than the teacher?
No.
This is
No.
just a personal project?
This is just no one ever encouraged me. Writing in my own native language, Polish, came to me with great ease. Writing and speaking. As a teenager, I was a delegate for this place, a delegate for this. They gave me give me a box, I would stand up on it and make a speech. But losing your own language is a traumatic experience. Though I am told that I am eloquent and so on, I still feel such a shortage often of ways of expressing myself. And the sad thing is, probably I lost a lot of what I knew in Polish.
Did you write the book in Polish?
Oh no,
Okay.
oh no. Right now I think in English, I dream in English. The only language in which I know 4-letter words are English. I try not to use them unless I'm extremely frustrated. There's one in particular.
How did you get the book published?
The book was published by the University of Michigan, Dearborn. While they published, and I greatly appreciate it, I had to pay for the printing. Okay. I wanted the cover to reflect, to get the sense of the title, No Man's Land. I did not want it to be flashy, but give this feeling of kind of a isolation, loneliness. Mm-hmm. I found on the internet a photograph that I wanted very much to use as a cover. You can buy those things. But I was unable to find the photographer who would give me permission. Mm-hmm. So I went on a site, I don't remember what's called, that all you do, you pick up and pay for the photo, for usage of the photo. Mm-hmm. And I found that, yes. I had a woman who did the layout, and I sent to her electronically that page.
Mm-hmm. So if someone wanted to find your book, how would they find it?
My book is on Amazon. It is in Kindle, it's a paperback. It's also available in the museum shop at the Holocaust Center here. Of course, also in Washington and in Skokie museum centers. And when I am invited to talk, I have books with me. And it's important for me to stress that what I am able to tell people in an hour's time is just in a nutshell. In order for them to know what happened, they need to read the book. And I'm not timid in promoting how important it is to read the book.
You know, you've talked a lot about the idea of acceptance and tolerance and diversity. Summarize what you want people to get from the book.
I want people to understand that if we don't live in a world that accepts diversity of people, as long as they are good human beings, if we don't accept diversity, horrors like a Holocaust can happen. And a Holocaust, horrors of that dimension don't start at once. What I stress to people, it proceeds with small increments, and we have to learn to recognize the initial signs and the increments. So my book is an example what happened and what can happen if we don't accept diversity in the world. I would like to add that I will be glad to come to any organization of good intention to speak about my life and book, and I don't charge for coming unless it is a commercial business. schools, churches, libraries, and I have quite a number of book clubs who went on Amazon and bought my book, and I came to have a book discussion, and they were very, very happy. People tell me that they couldn't put the book down. I have it over and over. In back of my book is an email address, and I find it heartwarming, the reaction I'm getting from readers.
As a result of promoting your book, you've been touring, you've been making appearances. Can you talk about a couple of appearances that really affected you?
I spoke at the Holocaust Center, where I speak about once a week, often to school groups or to public tours, and in public tours, one never knows how many people come up. In November, I had in my public tour group was a young woman and a young man, and I assumed that they are boyfriend and girlfriend. She bought the book in the museum shop. About a week later or so, I had a long email from her. She said that she was so touched by my book that she wanted to tell me about her life story. She was a very abused child. This was not her boyfriend, this was her son. She became pregnant at 14. And fortunately, a distant relative saved her life. She is right now a teacher in this house for incarcerated, adjudicated young people. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, it would mean so much for my students if they could hear you, but they are not allowed to leave the premises. I said, Kathleen, I'll come to your school. We entered Beale City, and there is one major store on the major road, and they had a big electric sign, welcome to Beale City, Irene Miller, thank you for sharing.
Oh, how nice.
We drove to the high school. The teachers prepared a potluck lunch. The principal was there, the superintendent was there.
They made you feel really welcome.
And then we had televisions and newspapers. At 1 o'clock, the school, everything closed off, and 300 kids were in the gymnasium sitting on benches.
And I am here to tell you.
The newspapers thereafter wrote, you could have heard a pin drop. I have here the plaque they gave me from the school.
Oh, looking back at your life, can you sum it up in a sentence or two?
I have a need to feel substance in my life. I'm retired, but I am not sitting in front of television. I don't know how to play cards, and I don't intend to learn. I have nothing against others using. I have a need to feel that I contribute. I try to live by the Jewish principle, yes, called Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam literally means repairing the world. That each of us has a responsibility in whatever way we can to make the world a little better for everyone. I try to live by that principle. How I relate to people in my personal life, how I use my time and skills to enrich the life of my community. I mentioned to you, I am a docent at the DIA. I am in their speakers bureau. I am a mediator in courts. I stay busy, but I know how to enjoy the little things in life. I love beautiful things, but I can enjoy the simplest things. Well, and I like to surround myself with people of substance and integrity.
Well, Irene, I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed talking with you. I get excited talking to you, and I feel so positive. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for appearing, and good luck with your book.
And thank you for having me.
My pleasure.